You are listening to Liberty Cafe, a podcast of the New Jersey Libertarian Party.
Okay, so we're back with another episode of Liberty Cafe. We haven't had an episode in over a year. After being quite active, we were doing episodes like once a month or something like that. But we were back. We're back again. This is Jay.
This is Joe.
And this is Mike.
And with us as a guest, we have Jacob Hornberger. Jacob Hornberger is currently seeking the Libertarian nod for the presidential nomination. He is the founder and president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, whose mission is to present a principled case for the libertarian philosophy. He received a BA from economics from Virginia Military Institute and his law degree from the University of Texas. He was a trial attorney for 12 years and an adjunct professor of law and economics at the University of Dallas. He served 8 years at the U.S. Army Reserve as an infantry officer. He left the practice of law to become the program director at FFF, the Foundation for FEE, Foundation for Economic Education in New York. He's been active in the Libertarian Party for a while, serving on the Libertarian Party's platform committee, is the recipient of the LP's Thomas Paine Award for Outstanding Communication of Libertarian Ideas. I know him from when I was around back when Brown ran, and he was seeking the Libertarian nomination for president back when Harry Brown. Did you do it both times, or was it that 2000?
It was in the 2000 race.
Okay, in the 2000 race. Yeah. Okay. And Harry Brown ended up with the nomination. There's a little more in his bio. I'm actually reading the bio from our canceled convention at which Jacob was supposed to show up at, but of course, with this COVID stuff going on, we had to cancel it. So without further ado, let's start grilling Jacob.
Well, it's nice to be here with y'all. Thank you very much for having me. I'm ready to be grilled.
Okay.
Excellent.
So I think mainly right now, the big people that are pushing you is the Mises Institute is really getting behind you.
Well, it's actually the Mises Caucus.
Mises Caucus, yeah, that's what I meant. I'm sorry, Mises Caucus, yes.
Yeah, the Mises Caucus is named after Ludwig von Mises, who's, of course, for libertarians, the greatest economist who's ever lived, and has served as a huge inspiration for me because of his principled approach to economics. And the Mises Caucus is composed of people that follow Mises, that believe the same way, and it's the fastest growing, I think, the most prestigious caucus in the party, and it's just a tremendous honor to have received their endorsement, because they put several candidates through an extensive interview process, asking them about Austrian economics and Mises and Rothbard and some of the principles of Austrian economics. And so to win their endorsement's been fantastic. And I mean, when I go to these conventions before the big shutdown with the corona crisis, every convention I'd have a few or several Mises people, and mostly young people, coming up and saying, "We're Mises Caucus, we're here for you. Tell us what you need us to do." It's been one of the really positive aspects of this whole campaign.
What? Why don't we go down the list? We'll try to do this kind of in a quick format of we'll just throw like a topic out, and we could do instead of a direct question, let you kind of say your piece on it, as opposed to when you've been in debates, it seems like everybody's kind of trying to one up each other or go at each other. Maybe this will be more in a relaxed tone. So like if we started out and we just talked about the Federal Reserve, right, as opposed to just blanket economics, how would we move from a controlled interest rate Federal Reserve system to a more open, free economy? Like, what would the transition look like? I mean, obviously you advocate for that, but how would you communicate that to potential libertarian voters that haven't voted libertarian, don't know libertarianism, but these are people we want to vote libertarian? How would you communicate that transition from centralized planning economics to a free market economic system?
Well, you're talking about two separate issues here. The first issue is, what do we want? I mean, what is the ideal monetary system? And then how do you achieve that ideal monetary system? But you never really reach the second stage until people are prepared to accept the first stage. I mean, obviously, if you make a case for like separating money and state, that's what I stand for, complete separation of money and state. We once had the finest monetary system in history. It was established by the Constitution. It was a gold coin, silver coin standard. It was sound money. There was never any allegations that the U.S. government was defrauding people with clipping the coins, shaving the edges off. The coins were very, very sound in terms of what they were represented to be. It was one of the major contributing factors to the highest standard of living in world history, especially in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Well, that's the second best. Friedrich Hayek comes up with the idea of the denationalization of money, or what I call the separation of money and the state. So when I'm talking to somebody about this, that's the case I'm going to make. I'm not talking about transition. I'm not talking about how we get there. The first stage is, this is what we want. Because if people can't accept what we want, there's no need to talk about transition, because they don't want it. There's no point in transitioning to it. So I make the case for liberty, which is, in this case, monetary liberty, a separation of money in the state, abolish the Federal Reserve, get government entirely out of the monetary sphere, a free market monetary system. All right, well then once somebody says, you know, Jacob, that makes sense. That's really, the free market produces the best of everything. Let the market decide what the medium of exchange is. It may be gold coins, silver coins, privately minted. It may be Bitcoins, cryptocurrencies, American Express bank checks. I like this idea. All right, well then, how do you achieve that as a practical basis? Well, obviously, we live under a constitutional government where you have a legislature, the Congress. The Congress would have to repeal the laws that set up the Federal Reserve. They would have to repeal any legislation that involves monetary issues. They would essentially have to separate money in the state. The ideal would be a constitutional amendment that would be like the First Amendment, which separated church and state, separating money in the state. So that's the practical side of this, going to Congress and saying, okay, the vast majority of Americans here have elected a libertarian president now, or even if they haven't, pressuring Congress to get this done. We see this, for example, in the drug war. I mean, that's what's happened with the drug war. Gradually, public opinion shifts and Congress is still playing catch up, but it's getting very close to teetering. So you start out first making the ideal, and then later you figure out, how do you get that? And you obviously get it by repealing laws that interfere with it.
And then I guess what I was asking too is, so, and I'm going to give an example, and maybe how would you do the example I'm going to give? Like, I remember it was when gas prices really went up to like $3. The first time we started seeing that as a regular basis, at least here on the East Coast. I know the West Coast, it's always been pretty high. But I remember Dr. Paul holding up a silver dime and saying, well, what about gas for a dime? And at that time, a silver dime was worth about $3. And that resonated with people. I mean, most people don't understand, most people that haven't looked at Austrian economics or economics at all, or only took an economics class, maybe do high schools offer them? I don't know. But maybe they've never had an economics class. How do you, like, what would you give them as a practical example to a larger audience that's outside of the circles we usually run in?
Well, that's a perfect example. I mean, you know, if somebody gets a silver quarter, I mean, quarters circulated when I was a kid, silver quarters circulated, dimes circulated. And today, if somebody gets a hold of a silver quarter, the last thing he's going to do is put four, unless he gets a hold of four of them, he's going to put four of those in a soft drink machine to buy $1 soft drink. It wouldn't make any sense. Why? Because you can go trade those quarters for, let's say, $10 each. And it shows you what the Federal Reserve has done. When I said they destroyed the finest monetary system in history, they ran out of circulation this fantastic monetary system of, well, they first nationalized gold, which, you know, you could clearly, I think people can relate to that this was the official money of the United States for more than 100 years, gold coins and silver coins. People carried around coinage, And that was the money. You know, we often hear that that the gold standard was paper money backed by gold. That's absolutely false. It was a gold coin standard. There were notes circulating, but everybody knew that those notes were promises to pay money. So what they did was Roosevelt nationalizes gold, just like the communists were doing in the Soviet Union. The average person can relate to that. Like, what's that all about? Nationalizing what had been the official money. And then they let silver coins continue to circulate. So why did they go out of circulation? Well, because when the Fed is flooding the economy year after year and decade after decade with these paper irredeemable notes that are promising to pay nothing, well, gradually the value of the coinage is going to rise in relationship to this oversupply of paper money. So obviously nobody's going to be stupid enough to put 4 quarters in there when those 4 quarters are worth, let's say, $40 to buy a soft drink. So I think it's a perfect example that Ron was using in that instance. I think also you can talk about what inflation, which is caused by government. The mainstream media often mixes inflation up with rising prices. The inflation is the oversupply of paper money. And, you know, look at how many people's savings have been wiped out. You know, women that are widows that get, you know, $500 pensions, fixed income pensions from their husbands who are now deceased. You know, $500 back 30 years ago was a lot of money. But that they're now today receiving the same $500, or widows are, and those $500 doesn't buy anything compared to what it bought 30 years ago. And I think people can relate to that. They can see, yeah, that's right. What the Federal Reserve has done is very, very destructive to people on fixed incomes, and it's wiped out the value of people's money assets.
One topic that we are not hearing much from the other parties anymore. And I guess with COVID, maybe everything's kind of on hold and we're not killing as many people, is this big war machine that seems to be never ending and just keeps going. And this war on terror that just keeps going and going and going. Is there anything you can say to speak to that?
How you wind it down?
I think it's very revealing as to the kind of society in which we live under these Democrats and Republicans, that there's so much death and suffering in this country with this coronavirus. And at the same time, nothing has impeded the death machine, the U.S. national security state, from continuing to inflict death and suffering on people in other parts of the world. This is absolutely horrendous from a moral standpoint. And I'm referring to, of course, the Middle East and Afghanistan, but we see it in other parts of the world too, like with the drug war that the military enforces. One of the most, and we're talking, of course, with bombs and missiles and bullets and so forth, but we're also talking about sanctions. And we've got this brutal system of sanctions against the people of Iran, which was already causing massive impoverishment. But now with this coronavirus crisis, it's horrendous. I mean, they can't get medical supplies. They can't get anything. They have the highest rate of death and infection. And the Trump administration says, we will not lift these sanctions. I mean, they're practically pleading with them to lift the sanctions. I mean, this is what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil, where you've got good people doing evil things with good intentions. And this idea of using sanctions as regime change or a political goal, it's no worse than terrorism. I mean, it's no better than terrorism. I mean, we condemn terrorism for attacking innocent civilians for the purpose of a political goal. That's exactly what they're doing with sanctions on Iran and North Korea and other people around the world. For me, and this, some of us in this race have similar positions, but there's others in the race that have diametrically different positions. My position on the troops is bring them all home from everywhere, including the ones that are not directly inflicting death and suffering. I challenge this whole notion of foreign interventionism entirely. I mean, nobody's invading the United States. So why are U.S. troops in these faraway lands killing people? Well, what's the point of all that? And all it does, you mentioned the war on terrorism, all it does is generate the anger and hatred that then manifests itself with terrorist retaliation, which is then used to wage the war on terrorism, which then is used to take away our liberties here at home. And it's why we live in one of the reasons we live in a dysfunctional society, like with TSA pat downs at the airport. This is all to preserve foreign interventionism. I would bring all the troops home, and I'd go one step further. And I'm talking about Korea, Europe, World War II is over, Africa, Latin America, bring them all home and discharge them. As they hit American shores, discharge them into the private sector. They're not needed anymore. You don't need foreign interventionism. And then I also take it a step further. I believe that this type of government structure that we have, that's called a national security state, is the worst mistake in U.S. history. It is a primary cause of the destruction of our liberty here. And so I'm talking about what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, including the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA. Dismantle them. Get rid of them. They have no place in a free society. We should never have adopted this type of governmental structure. I favor a limited government republic, which is the type of governmental structure that our country was founded on. It's got a basic small military force that's able to marshal assets and people in case there ever was an invasion. But there's the chance of an invasion of the United States are virtually non-existent. No nation state has the resources, the money, the military capability, or even the interest of crossing the oceans and invading and successfully conquering the United States. It just can't happen. So we restore a limited government republic. We get rid of all these military bases here in the United States. What are they for? I mean, I can understand the 1800s, you'd have a fort around a small community to protect the community or the city from Native American attacks. But what are they doing now? What are all these bases for domestically? So you get rid of all this empire, this militarism, and you rely on citizen soldiers in case there ever was an invasion. I mean, every single person that has served in the military is not going to forget how to fire an M16 or automatic weapon, machine gun, or artillery rounds, or whatever. You don't just forget those kind of things. And they're ready to go and defend a country voluntarily, not through conscription. So that's my position. That these Democrats and Republicans they're a pro-death party. That the Republicans pride themselves on being pro-life, but they're really pro-death, because while they protect the rights of the unborn here at home, they are killing born children and born people. They killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children with sanctions in the 1990s. That was when Madeleine Albright, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, told 60 Minutes that the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children was difficult, but it was worth it. I mean, how do you justify this in a moral or religious sense? And that's the other thing. That's what's so funny to see these Republicans especially, but also Democrats going to church every Sunday, and while they're over there inflicting massive death and suffering on people around the world.
I completely agree with you. What do you also think of the embassies that we have around the world? I assume some of them we really should have embassies, while some of our embassies probably create more chaos and more problems with the people if we're not wanted there. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think an embassy can consist of a very small staff, like an ambassador, that really just serves as a communications device, where if you need to get a message quick to the domestic regime, or if an American citizen needs some help, he gets under arrest or something, mm-hmm. He can call the embassy and they can kind of see if they can do anything for him. But these professional diplomats, they're the worst diplomats ever. I mean, they're usually very arrogant. A lot of them get their positions because they donated to the big money to the political campaign, and they're really not representative of the American people. The best representatives of the United States is the private sector. I mean, you go anywhere in the world, people love Americans. I've traveled to different parts of the world, and it's always people love Americans. I've been to Cuba. Now, if anybody should hate Americans, it's Cubans, because of this embargo that the U.S. government has enforced for over 50 years. The Cuban people were so nice to me. And I even asked a taxi driver once, I said, why are you so nice to me after what my government has done to you? And he says, why are you responsible for what your government is doing to us? Mm-hmm. And the Iranian people, you go to Iran as an American, and I will guarantee you the Iranian people will treat you like a super VIP. So foreigners love Americans for their just tourism, for their business. They love American businessmen. They love our values, represented by the Statue of Liberty and the Bill of Rights. They love our cultural groups, our trade groups. They just hate the U.S. government, and that's why they hate a lot of the diplomats. But if you start bringing all the troops home, you stop intervening, you stop the regime change operations, you stop the coups, the assassinations, then those diplomats really don't have anything to do. Now they're not represented. A lot of them are CIA representatives in these embassies. Well, Under my regime, there's no CIA anymore. And so now diplomats are serving a more traditional function like they did in the 1800s, just as a means to communicate and help Americans that happen to be over there.
So, do you think we've been drawn into more of this foreign interventionism by being in the UN? And if so, do you think we should exit?
Well, I think it's independent. I would say exit immediately. But the interventionism long preceded the UN. That move for, it's an interesting battle that took place in America, because America starts out as a non-interventionist limited government republic. I mean, if you had told the American people at the Constitutional Convention that the Constitution was going to bring into existence a national security state with a CIA, NSA, vast military industrial, a welfare state, a drug war, they would have laughed. I mean, remember, they'd been operating under the Articles of Confederation for more than 10 years, where the federal government didn't even have the power to tax. Imagine that. No taxation at all.
So dreamy.
I could imagine that.
And so the move toward interventionism starts with the Spanish-American War. It goes into World War I, which was obviously just a total futile, ridiculous waste of American life. It goes into World War II, where Roosevelt maneuvered and manipulated the Japanese into attacking at Pearl Harbor to circumvent the American people who wanted to stay out of that war. Then you get the United Nations. But the drive toward interventionism, the Korean War, I mean, obviously Truman used the UN as the excuse to go there instead of the Constitution. He should have sought a declaration of war, but they would have gone in even without the UN. So you're dealing with two separate things here that are guided by the same mindset, the same bureaucratic, banality of evil mindset. But they would have gone into Korea. They would have gone into Vietnam. They would have gone into, look, they go into Iraq without any UN permission. They go into Afghanistan without UN permission. So yeah, I'd say get out of the UN and stop the foreign interventionism and dismantle the national security state.
Now, Jacob, if I may, I just want to touch on one part, because obviously ending the death machine is all of our goal. We all want the troops to come home. We want to end the wars. We want to hashtag bring them home. But part of the death machine is 22 American soldiers committing suicide every day because of the post-traumatic stress syndrome that they deal with when they come home from seeing all of the ill that they've seen, that they've been forced into that situation. Though voluntarily, they don't choose their assignment once they do volunteer for the armed forces. When they come home and we discharge all of them, one of the concerns from people inside the party and other campaigns is that we'll see mass graves practically of troops, because we're going to be leaving them out to dry and we won't be supporting them. Do you feel that the government has a role in making sure that they are protected and do have the best of care possible when they come back, since the government is the entity that put them in that position in the first place?
I think it depends on the contract that was entered into with the soldier. That if the contract provided for that type of care, yes. If the contract did not provide for that care, I say no. Now, does that mean that I'm uncaring or that I don't care about the plight of these soldiers? Absolutely not. I mean, the first thing we have to do is stop adding to the number of veterans, because I mean that's the first goal. If you're not adding to the number of veterans by bringing all these troops home, well, at least you've stopped the problem of adding new suicides that are involved in this. And I think it's more than post-traumatic stress disorder. I think it's guilt. A lot of this stuff is guilt. I mean, when you send people into foreign lands to kill or be killed, whose government has never attacked or invaded the United States, where is the morality in killing people there? I mean, I remember talking to a Catholic priest of mine after a friend of mine in Denver, who's a libertarian. He's deceased now, right after the invasion of Iraq. And y'all know that I have a military background, but I said to him, Father Joe, if I were conscripted or called back into service and sent into Iraq, and they give me an M16 and I'm in the middle of Baghdad and somebody starts firing at me, do I have a right to fire back and kill that person? And Father Joe said, absolutely not. You have absolutely no right under God's laws to do that. It is not self-defense, because you don't have a right to be there. And he has a right to shoot you because you don't have a right to be there. The analogy would be like a burglar coming into your house. that, and you get in a shootout with him, he can't claim that self-defense because you fired first. He didn't have a right to be there. And I said, well, does that mean then, what does that mean? He says, that means that you just sit there and you die. And that's what's consistent with God's law. God will understand what happened here, but you cannot wrongfully kill a human being. Well, I think a lot of these soldiers, they're not serial killers. That, serial killers have submerged their conscience to such a deep level that it's practically non-existent. Your average soldier is a very good person. He's got a family. They're Christians, or Jews or Muslims, whatever. They're very religious. They have a highly developed sense of conscience. They're put in these positions of killing people that they shouldn't be killing. How can that not work against your conscience? I mean, it would bother me if I went and killed people that didn't deserve to be killed. So I think a lot of these suicides are much more than just the stress of combat. I think it's like, oh my gosh, I've killed a person that didn't deserve to be killed. And I remember this early on, and it was either, I think it was before the invasion of Afghanistan, but it may have been the invasion of Iraq. There was an article in the Washington Post that said that a soldier was struggling over this. And so he talked to the chaplain, which ironically was Catholic. I'm Catholic. And he said, Father, I don't know if I can kill somebody here. I don't feel comfortable with this. And it was amazing that the priest said to him, you have the right to obey the orders of your president. And I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, is this crazy? Well, I have no doubts that if that guy went over there, and I have no doubts that he did, he followed his orders and deployed, that when he killed somebody, he may have been one of the ones committing suicide. Now, okay, let's talk about treatment for a second, though. We've come to the point in this country where we always just think that only government can help people out. And we've lost this faith in voluntary action, doctors and counselors helping people out on a voluntary basis. I mean, you don't see a whole lot of that now because there's this cynicism where, oh, that's the government's job. That's the government's job to do it. I think if you have a really free market society where there's no income tax and no IRS, people are free to keep everything they earned, doctors would be getting rich from the people who could pay, and they would be more than willing to help out guys that really needed help on a voluntary basis. I'll give you an example of this. My dentist here in Northern Virginia, he's retired now, but he and other dentists got together on a voluntary basis because there's no Medicare or Medicaid for dental work. And every week on one day a week, Thursdays, they would rotate and give free dental care to the poor. And when I was a kid, before Medicare and Medicaid, doctors provided I grew up in the poorest city in the United States, Laredo, Texas, and doctors were providing free medical care to most of the patients that would come in their office. They knew they couldn't pay. I mean, sometimes they'd bring in tamales or something, but these people were really poor, and doctors never turned away anyone. Our hospital was Mercy Hospital, a Catholic hospital. They treated people for poor. They got donations in. This is what I want to recapture in this country. Get rid of the IRS, get rid of the government taking care of people. Let's rely on a free people to do this. And I have no doubts that there'd be plenty of counselors and therapists that would be willing to help out those soldiers.
Do you, let's shift gears a little bit. Do you feel that the tagline that was used quite often, unfortunately, socially liberal, fiscally conservative, shortchanges libertarian philosophies and kind of even insults the NAP because it forgets about all that, as far as I'm concerned? Do you agree with that, or what do you think of that?
I totally agree with it. It's a ridiculous slogan, and it's a telltale sign that whenever you hear somebody saying, oh, I'm socially liberal and I'm economically conservative, I'm a libertarian, that's a telltale sign that that person is not a libertarian in its genuine sense. It's a ridiculous slogan. It doesn't say anything about the exquisiteness, the radicalness, the beauty of libertarianism. I mean, I consider libertarianism properly understood with all of its beautiful radicalness, the greatest political and economic philosophy in the history of man. I mean, this thing is, to me, it's like a Beethoven symphony. And it not only has the virtue of giving people freedom to choose to make their way in life, it is really the way out of all these crises. So it's moral because it protects free will and freedom of choice, except for people that, as you say, initiate force or fraud. But at the same time, it's a way out of all these crises, including the crisis we're in. It's the only way out. I think the slogan gives short shrift to what libertarianism really is.
Segueing off of that, I think this plays into this next question perfectly. Speaking of libertarianism and being radical and making sure people understand the message, what should the short-term and maybe long-term success gauges be for the Libertarian Party, being that you are going to be the figure that people think about when they think libertarianism if you are nominated? What do you believe the success should be? What do we gauge as success as a party?
Well, my measure of success is totally different from most people's success. My success for a candidate is how successfully did he stick with the principles under pressure? If he succeeded in sticking with the principles 100%, that to me is a totally successful campaign. It doesn't matter to me if he gets 0.5%, 1%, 10%, or whatever. Did he explain to people what we are about? Why we're here in this movement? What is it that we've discovered that other people haven't discovered? Why are we devoting our lives? Why do you devote these shows to it? If he's done that, man, to me, he's successful. And if as y'all know, there's a big part of the movement that is reform oriented. They've essentially accepted the premises of the welfare-warfare state. And they say it's a permanent feature. There's no sense in trying to get rid of it. It's here to stay, and let's just resign ourselves to reforming it. And so they don't like the radicalness of libertarianism. They say we shouldn't go out and tell people what we really stand for. Let's just accept that it's here and come up with school vouchers, health savings accounts, Social Security privatization, legalization of marijuana only, and that's not freedom. I mean, that's the problem with that. I've been attacked by the reform element that says, oh, Jacob, you're just trying to show you're more libertarian. And I've heard this attack for 30 years. It's a ridiculous attack. I mean, how do you even measure such a thing? It's ridiculous. The reason I favor dismantling infringements on freedom is because that's the only way you can get freedom. If you leave an infringement of freedom intact, then you haven't achieved anything. So I say let's measure our success not by how many votes you get, because a lot of times the reformers will just water down the message and say, well, okay, I believe in public schooling, and let me show you how we libertarians are going to make the public schooling work more efficiently. And one of the people in the race, not in the presidential race, but in another candidate here, he made a central element of his campaign showing people how to make public schooling work from a libertarian perspective. Well, okay, let's assume he gets 10% of the votes, which he didn't, but let's assume he did. I wouldn't consider that a successful campaign, because he isn't telling people that educational liberty is separating school and state the way our ancestors separated church and state. If he goes and makes the case for educational liberty and gets 1%, he's my hero. He's the guy. And of course, the attitude always is, well, you can't get 10% with pure libertarianism. Well, we don't know that because there's very few people making the principal case. But I say, regardless, it's the only chance you can ever achieve a free society. If libertarians are not going to make the case for liberty, how do we expect people to ever consider liberty? I mean, like education. Why would somebody ever think in terms of getting rid of government involvement in education unless they hear the idea? If all you do is make the case for vouchers as a way to improve public schooling, nobody ever thinks about it, and therefore the lack of freedom becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy by these reformers. So the reformers have essentially thrown in the towel. That's why they're gravitating toward Justin Amash in this race, because Amash is their archetypical example of a reformer. He accepts the premises of the welfare-warfare state. He wants to conserve it, but he wants to reform it. He wants to improve it. Well, that's what the reform crowd in the libertarian movement want to do. It's what the reform crowd in the Libertarian Party want to do. I say we should be about liberty, which means making the case to our fellow Americans for dismantling infringements on liberty, not reforming them.
What do you say to somebody, and it's along the lines of what you just were talking about, kind of the messaging of the party, but when I'm at Thanksgiving dinner, and the story, the situation of the drug war comes up, and I try to explain to people that it should be legalized. They have to, people need to live with their own moral hazard of this and stuff. And you just always get that same reaction of, if we legalize all drugs, it's going to be total bedlam. It's going to be people just cracked out on drugs everywhere. What about the heroin addicts? What about, all these different social ills that one could attribute to drugs they bring up, and it's going to be the end of the world. How do you communicate that? No, it's not. What do you tell those people? How will you communicate that to voters on the trail, that we could end the drug war is endable? You could legalize all drugs, and at the end of the day, it's a more compassionate way of conducting humanity. And at the end of the day, less people may be addicted, or all the different things. How do you say that to them?
Well, the first thing to do is to stop bringing this up at family dinners. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I have family members that are ardent conservatives. And, one of them has been an ardent advocate of the drug war for the entire time I've been a libertarian. And I said to her one time, I said a while back, I said, have you changed your position at all? And she said, I mean, look at the disaster this thing has been. And she says, no, I'm still concerned about the kids. I'm concerned about the kids getting drugs. And so, at some point you have to realize that you're wasting your time with certain people, and, that you're just never going to bring them around. And so then it's just a matter of, well, do you want to keep pressing it? And I've decided it's not worth it. At family stuff, and everything, I don't bring it up unless I'm asked. I mean, somebody will say, hey, Jacob, what about drugs? And like, I have nephews and nieces, they'll bring their friends over and they want to talk about it, man. They're excited about libertarianism. The adults, it's like, oh my God, I don't want to hear this because they're conservatives. So you have to judge each case when you're trying to advance liberty. You have to judge each case on its own merits. And if somebody says it's clear that they're not going to accept this, I just say, okay, let's change the subject, because it doesn't do much good. Okay, well, let's say somebody's receptive, but just is challenging you and is interested. Well, there's different avenues to take, and you have to kind of judge the situation as it happens. There's the moral case, and okay, I respond to the moral case, but I think it's a very small minority of people that respond to the moral case. Okay, what's the moral case? People have a right to ingest whatever they want to ingest. I mean, this is basic fundamental principles of freedom 101, that if you're not free to put something into your mouth without being put in jail for it, there's no way you can be considered free. So, I mean, that's an argument I would start with, because there's some people that, wow, that's a shocking thing. And I might also point out that, there's drug laws in Cuba and North Korea, because that's what they want to do. They want to control people, but freedom entails the right to live your life any way you choose, as long as there's no force or fraud. But then I immediately will say, we know there's drug addiction in society and there's drug usage, but they belong in the private sector with rehab centers and therapists and counselors, not in the criminal justice sector. And in fact, if you look at the drug war, and I'll transcend to the racial bigotry of this thing, because some people respond to that. This is the most racially bigoted government program since segregation. The blacks are filling American penitentiaries disproportionately because it's giving the bigoted cops and bigoted judges an opportunity to go after them. Now, I'm not saying all judges and cops are bigots. I'm saying some of them are. And this drug war does that. And then the final argument I would use, well, you can always bring up the destructiveness of the war on drugs, that it's accomplished nothing. That this is the utilitarian case. It's gone on for 30 or 40 years. They've been putting people in jail with maximum sentences forever. Asset forfeiture, corruption, death and destruction. They've destroyed Mexico, and they haven't accomplished anything. So that appeals to the people on the practical side. And finally, here's the clincher. You bring up prohibition. And alcohol prohibition, we saw what this did with prohibition. We tried this with alcohol, which is much more destructive than heroin or cocaine or meth. Kills a lot more people. And we don't make that illegal. We just try to treat it with Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the most successful drug rehab program in history. Is there an alcohol problem in America? Of course there is. There's a drug problem. But we don't criminalize alcohol addiction. We leave it in the private sector as a social problem to be dealt with. That's how we should handle drugs. And that's my little array of arguments for the drug war.
So if I could follow up, Jay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Just a concern. Obviously, you mentioned what your idea is for a successful campaign. So my question to you then is this: it's late October. There's a CNN town hall. It's you and whomever your VP pick, or whoever we pick to be the VP on stage. Anderson Cooper's throwing up questions. They bring up a mother of 4 whose son has a heroin addiction and whose best friend has died from heroin. Are you giving the same answer?
Of course, even more so. The notice that this guy died under the drug war. The drug war didn't do anything to prevent that death. It doesn't prevent anything that your son has become an addict. That if drugs were legalized, your son could then be more open about his drug addiction. And that's really the way to treatment. That when you try to submerge a problem like this, it drives it deeper into your subconscious. And you don't have the incentive to seek treatment. You go into a rehab center and you don't know who's a narc. You go to, let's say, Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and you say, I'm Jacob, I'm here for my drug addiction. And you don't know if a narc's there, and who wants to take a chance with that? But with legalization, now the addict has the ability to talk openly about it, which is one of the key steps of treatment. He can talk to his friends, his family. He may still be, taking his heroin, but now everybody can be open about it. And so you have a much better chance of relieving the problem as compared to what we have today, where you have these deaths. You also have the deaths from dirty needles in this thing with heroin. Why are there dirty needles? Because it's a black market. In a legalized market's much more humane for drug addicts because they can go to the pharmacy, they can get clean needles for their addiction, they can get good drugs. I mean, most of the people, or I would say many of the people that die of drug overdoses, they're not dying of drug overdoses at all.
Impurities.
Badly mixed,
Impurities.
Exactly. Yeah. Corrupted drugs on the black market because the producers and sellers know they can't get sued. No pharmacy is going to sell a corrupted drug because they know they're going to be liable civilly, $1 million judgment. That's why drug legalization is a much more humane way to treat people that are addicted to drugs.
It's nice to hear you say that you would answer it that way. Just to get this away from the whole Q&A thing and to make it more of a little bit more of a dialogue. It's refreshing to hear that that's the answer you would give, because it hasn't been the answer that's been given in recent years. So it's appreciative.
No, that's what I'm saying is a successful libertarian campaign to me. I mean, I get fired up when I hear a libertarian candidate really talking about libertarian principles. I'll always vote for a libertarian, but if they're running a Republican light, reform-oriented campaign, I'm not interested. It does nothing for me. It doesn't get my juices going. It just doesn't do anything. I mean, to me, you've got to fire up your base, and the way you fire up a base is you go on CNN and you say, legalize all drugs. I mean, this is one of my beefs with some LP candidates. They're scared to call for the legalization of everything: meth, heroin, cocaine. Milton Friedman, taught me this in a way that he went after occupational licensure and wanted to show why there should be no occupational licensure. Well, he could have gone after hairdressers, licensures, and shoe shine people. And he said, no, in order for people to understand the principle, you've got to tackle the toughest case. So he tackled medical licensure and showed why there should not be any licensure for doctors or healthcare providers. And it's in his book, Capitalism and Freedom, and it's an eloquent case for, well, once you understand that principle on medical licensure, everything else falls into place. So if you make the case for legalizing heroin, cocaine, meth, and people understand the reasoning behind it, then the whole system collapses. If all you do is settle for, we're going to legalize marijuana, because marijuana is not harmful, you haven't exposed people to the principle of what liberty really means.
Jay, you had something?
Yep. So changing the subject a little bit, and Trump and Trump supporters right now have been very hostile to free trade around the world, especially when it comes to Americans buying products from other countries. And if you can just speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, to me, it boggles the mind that trade and free trade is still the subject of debate. I mean, you would think that more than 200 and some odd years after Adam Smith's book, The Wealth of Nations in 1776, that this one would have been just over. And the fact that Trump and his supporters are waging this trade war against China it's just phenomenal to me. And arguing that this is beneficial. I mean, Trump really believes that this is beneficial to America, that I'm going to win this war. It's just so ludicrous. It flies in the face of every reputable economist's opinion on trade. I mean, trade is a simple process. It's where people are engaging into an exchange, two people, where they're giving up something they value less for something they value more. That's all that's happening, which means that you can increase your standard of living just through trade. You can do it without even a manufacturing industry. Just you give me 5 apples and I give you 7 oranges. Our standard of living have both raised because we've given up something we value more, less for something we value more. So he starts his trade war with China. And of course, we all knew it was going to happen. We libertarians is that he starts bankrupting American farmers because clearly China's going to retaliate, which they shouldn't have done. I mean, logically, they should have said, well, if you all want to shoot yourselves in the foot, we're not going to shoot ourselves in the foot in retaliation. But that's not the way politicians answer. So they retaliate. So he drives farmers into bankruptcy. But then he starts unilaterally raising tariffs. He gets angry that because the Chinese are not buckling and they're retaliating. So he raises tariffs even more without even seeking congressional permission. I mean, this is classic dictatorial conduct. The dictator gets angry. And so he says, well, then I'm going to raise tariffs. And he thinks, this is what was really fascinating about it too. He thought the Chinese were paying the tariffs. And he says, I'm teaching them a lesson. And well, of course, what we all knew is that Chinese don't pay the tariffs. The Americans do. That a tariff is nothing more than a fancy word for a sales tax. It's a sales tax on imported goods, on foreign goods. So when you buy a foreign car, a tariff is you're just paying a sales tax on that good. Well, he's raising them without congressional permission. This is classic dictatorial conduct. And then he has this slush fund that's produced by this tax revenue that Americans have paid, that he then converts into a welfare plan for the farmers that he's bankrupted. And then he goes and says, look what a good person I am because I'm bailing out the farmers that he's thrown into bankruptcy. The ideal on trade, on borders, I mean, let me just make it real clear where I stand on borders. Open borders, free trade, unilateral free trade. You don't need to negotiate anything with anybody. Trump, he's got this mindset that we've elected him to be the trade representative for American businesses. And that, he's the art of the deal. He's going to negotiate this thing on behalf of American businesses and consumers. Ridiculous. The government should have no role in trade at all. That just open the borders to unilateral free trade. No negotiating, no NAFTA, no Pacific Agreement, none of that nonsense. Just free the American people to travel and trade wherever they want and open immigration. Let people come here from foreign lands, buy and sell, invest or whatever. Just the free interactions of goods, services, and people with all over the world.
Yeah, right now we let people come in and then we don't allow them to work. And the conservatives all say, oh, look, they're poor, they're collecting welfare, but we're restricting them from being able to make a living. And the other thing that the Trump restriction of trade is doing, it's going to make more of a military problem in the future.
Yeah, that was Bastiat's famous point, or at least the line attributed to Frederick Bastiat, the famous 19th century libertarian who's been such an inspiration for so many of us. I don't know if he really said this. It's questionable, but it's a great line that's attributed to him. When goods don't cross borders, soldiers will. That trade, you hear this autarkic mentality that says, we got to be self-sufficient. We can't be dependent on foreign nations. We have to have our own oil industry and our own automobile industry. This is ridiculous. That when you establish these mutual trade relationships with other countries, you get these interdependencies that diminish the chances of war. Because when people are getting everything they want just by production and trade, why would they want their government to go to war against the people that they've created these interdependencies with? So we ought to be encouraging interdependencies with nations like Russia and China and Iran and Korea, North Korea, because once you create these interdependencies, the incentive to war just plummets.
Speaking of dependencies, okay, and government intervention in the marketplace, Justin Amash was recently on MSNBC, and he was speaking about the lockdown and the government's response to it from both the economical perspective and from the tackling the pandemic perspective. But focusing a little bit more on the economical perspective, he agrees that no, the big businesses shouldn't have gotten any money. But he then in turn says that it is indeed small government for the federal government to turn around and pay individuals, money on a monthly basis until the COVID pandemic is over. I don't believe, and I'm sure others don't believe, that this is consistent with libertarian principles. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll let you answer the question. But how would a President Hornberger handle the economic crisis created by the pandemic?
Well, it's not only not consistent with libertarian principles, it's directly contrary to libertarian principles. I mean, this notion that, I couldn't believe it when he told the host that limited government, no, big government is when the federal government is giving money to big corporations and banks. Limited government is when it's giving this free check to families. That's ludicrous. Look, we have to ask, what is the role of government in society? And this is what differentiates us from the conservatives as compared to libertarians. And Amash, okay, he's a conservative. He acknowledges that. He's a libertarian-leaning conservative. His plan, sending this free welfare check, and that's what it is. It's a free, he wants to send $1,200 check to every single American indefinitely into the future. He wants the federal government to do that. And as long as the coronavirus crisis lasts. Well, this is entirely consistent with conservatism. It's also consistent with liberalism, progressivism. I've often said that there's really no difference between conservatism and liberalism, or the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. They're really just flip sides of the same coin. There's like one big welfare warfare party divided into two wings, much like the NFL is divided into two conferences. But so the conservatives love these kind of things. And oh, by the way, the reform wing of the libertarian movement and the Libertarian Party, they love them too. They call them public policy prescriptions. They would love this kind of stimulus plan that Amash favors. But the first thing we got to ask is, what is the role of government in a free society? Is the role of government to take money from one person and give it to another person? Notice that what Amash doesn't do, what conservatives never do, is ask, where's the money coming from? He's very cavalier. I want to send $1,200 to every person. And imagine, we could have the spectacle of a Libertarian Party presidential candidate, if he's made this the nominee of this party, going out and saying, we libertarians believe in giving free welfare checks enforced by the IRS and the income tax. Now, people might challenge him. Well, where is this money coming from, Congressman Amash? I don't know if he's thought about that. Well, there's only three ways that it comes. One, by stealing money from people through the IRS. Historically, libertarians have always stood against the Internal Revenue Service and the income tax. So did Americans. Americans live without the IRS and income tax for more than 100 years. They believe that was what freedom's about, keeping everything you earn and deciding what to do with it. So automatically, to fund this thing, he's got to tax people through the IRS. Well, who's got money to tax? Can you imagine if all of a sudden President Trump says, I'm going to raise taxes on everybody to send everybody a $1,200 check? And so how are they doing this? They're adding $2 trillion onto the national debt. They're borrowing it. And notice what's happening here now. Government has no money. You see, this is what the mainstream press doesn't understand either. This is not some big Uncle Sam that's your rich uncle that's got money to give out to you. There is no money here. This is a broke government. Before the crisis, Trump was spending $4 trillion and bringing in $3 trillion in taxes. How does he do that? He just borrows the money. So the government's $23 trillion in debt. And now he was adding another trillion, that's 24 trillion. This 2 trillion is going to 26 trillion. Now, where's the benefit of that? Suppose I offer you $1,000 a month free, like Amash is doing. Okay, he's offering $1,200 a month. Let's say I adopt the Yang plan. Democrat Andrew Yang, his plan was just like Amash's. He was given $1,000 a month. Okay, and I say to you, here's your free $1,000, and at the end of the year, you get your city card bank, your charge statement, and you see a charge there for $13,000. And you say, Jacob, what's this about? And I said, well, that's your $1,200, your $1,000 a month. And you're saying, well, wait a minute, I thought it was free. And, well, what are you talking about? I don't have any money. I'm broke. I had to charge it on your credit card. Oh, well, gosh, that doesn't sound like a really good deal. Why'd you charge me $13,000 instead of $12,000? Well, because I have to charge you for the service. I mean, I got to do this. Or the third method is the Federal Reserve, where they're just printing the money. And which, of course, means massive inflation around the corner, which devalues everybody's money. In other words, and inflation's a tax. So in other words, Amash's plan is going to plunder and loot somebody. He doesn't explain who. Democrats and Republicans never did explain who they're going to steal the money from, but they got to steal it from somebody, because it's Frederick Bastiat's great line. The state is the great fiction by which everyone is trying to live at the expense of everyone else. And that's really what he's doing. He's saying, I'm going to give you this money. And when he gets out on the campaign trail, if he is the nominee, that's what he's going to tell voters. My plan is to give every voter $1,200. And he's not going to say where it's going to come from. He's not going to say, I'm going to tax you for your $1,200. But for a libertarian to be going out and representing people saying, this is what libertarians stand for, I think it's going to be a huge setback. We don't stand for that. We stand for a way of life where people keep everything they earn and they decide what to do with it. Okay, now how do you address the current crisis? There is no way that a libertarian can resolve the crisis under the status quo. We've seen this over and over again, that Democrats and Republicans, because they have bad systems, because they have bad philosophies, get into a crisis. And they get America into crises, and they come to us libertarians and they say, okay, how do you address this crisis? Well, libertarianism doesn't purport to be a philosophy that fixes the crises that Democrats and Republicans and conservatism and liberalism produce. We've never purported to be that kind of philosophy. We can't fix their system. And I've said this for 30 years at the Future of Freedom Foundation, which I emphasize does not endorse my candidacy. What we need is new systems, which means we need a new philosophy, libertarianism. Now, what does that mean? Okay, you set the foundation for something completely different, completely new, a new economic system, one where there's no internal revenue service, no income tax, where people are suddenly free to keep everything they earn, no withholding, no FICA, no payroll, none of the mandatory charity. So the $4 trillion that they're taking out of the private sector, that's a lot of money, where that's now in the private sector. Notice that there's millions of Americans right now that don't have a nest egg to get them through even 1 or 2 months of unemployment. In a free market system, you can save gobs of money. I mean, people in the 1800s are saving tons of money. That was one of the reasons for the rise of capital. Okay, you get a free market healthcare system. We got a centrally planned system here, which is a socialist system. For 30 years, I published a book in '94 called The Dangers of Socialized Medicine. It's as relevant today as it was back then. Get government totally out of healthcare. The Federal Reserve, get government out of the monetary system. Okay, what I'm doing is saying, let's build the foundation for the future. I'm not trying to fix the current system. You don't elect me president because I can fix this system of theirs. It's inherently defective. Elect me president so that we can move this country in a freer, better, more prosperous, healthy direction. That's the only way out of this thing. Keeping this is what I would present to the American people if I were the nominee of this party. If you like where we are as a country, if you like the direction this country's headed in, if you like where this country was heading in, where you got massive suicide rates, including among young people, which is really strange and unusual, mass unexplained killings, people broke, impoverished, can't even have the savings to get through a couple of months. You've got this massive infection and death toll with bureaucrats that don't know what they're doing. They're running around like chickens with their heads cut off, and they become little mini dictators in these mayors and governorships. If you like all that, vote for Biden or Trump. Either one. Doesn't matter which one you vote for, because you're going to get the same system. If you want a new system, if you want out of this, join up with us libertarians, because we will pull this country out, because our philosophy is different from their philosophy.
So
Do
we
you
are.
think the government should just on the existing debt? Do you moving to a non-IRS system? What would you do with the debt? I mean, this trillions of dollars can never be paid. Do you just write it off? Do you repudiate it? What would we do with that debt?
Well, actually, it can be paid. I mean, it would mean massive seizure, massive collection of taxes from the American people. The average person, I mean, each taxpayer owes his proportionate share is $200,000. And so if
I'm not paying that.
well, yeah, I mean, they would come and just take whatever you have.
Yeah.
And don't, okay, you may not have $400,000 if you're married, but you got maybe a home with some equity. You've got some some assets. These are vicious people. Look what they did in Argentina when they were threatened with default and not able to borrow any more money. They just started confiscated 401ks, pension funds.
Yeah, I'm afraid of that personally.
Huh?
I'm personally afraid of that.
Yeah, everybody should be afraid of it because these are vicious people. When they need their money, they're going to start going. I mean, remember, Roosevelt confiscated gold. This would be official money. He said, you will turn it in. He ordered every American, turn in your gold coins. And if you don't, we will prosecute you on a felony conviction or get a felony conviction to get you. And it was like, I don't know, 10 years in the penitentiary or something for owning gold coins. They get vicious when they get desperate. Okay, what's my position on the debt? Well, I consider it a contract. I consider any kind of debt instrument. When you're borrowing money, you've entered into a contract. And I think government should honor its contracts. And there's a lot of people that older people that they have bonds. They've invested in bonds and all of a sudden you default, you've wiped out them totally. But having said that, I believe that an implicit part of every government contract is the right of people to alter or abolish the government. I mean, we know that from the Declaration of Independence. So there's no way that a generation can bind a future generation to keeping a particular political system. The American people chose this system back in the 1930s, and then they expanded on it in the 1960s, the New Deal, the Great Society, the warfare state. And so over time, this debt just kept mounting and mounting because, obviously politicians don't like to tax people because that makes people upset. So we'll just keep charging your credit card. And people kept saying, like you said, I mean, oh, it'll never be paid. They'll never come and collect it from me. Well, does that mean that we're bound by this? I say absolutely not. That we should strive for a free society, which means abolishing the income tax, abolishing the IRS. That's our heritage. That was our system for more than 100 years. At that point, if government cannot pay its debts, then that's just the way things go. That nobody's guaranteed anything in life. When you invest in the stock market, your stock may go up, but it may go down. It may go down to zero. Nobody is guaranteed success in life. And if you happen to invest in government bonds, you take your risks. And that risk is that we libertarians and the young people of this country and people your age that says, you know what, we're not bound by this welfare state. We're not bound by this warfare state. That's our parents' thing. That's our grandparents' thing. If we want a free society, let's go for it and dismantle this whole thing and get a limited government republic. And if that means that they can't pay their debts, well, that's just tough luck for the people that made that investment. It should never be, the debt should never be used to interfere with our attempt to achieve a free society.
Okay, we are now a little over an hour into the show. I want to do about an hour, so I think we should start thinking about summarizing.
Yeah, can I want one more question for Jacob, because I think this sums a lot of things up with all the different aspects we talked about of government and how they do their thing. Which one would you, if you could only change one or abolish one or however whatever it needs to be to resolve the issue in your mind, which one do you think would give the biggest bang for the buck and have the most lasting effect to bring around freedom?
Bring all the troops home and stop foreign interventionism immediately.
I have two very short answer questions that I know will be really quick.
Okay.
Sharp and Gray and Sharp put out their income tax plan with a flat rate above 30 grand in a UBI. We know how you feel about the UBI and the monthly payments already. What is an appropriate income tax rate, sir?
There's only one appropriate rate. 0.
And my next question is by request. What would you do if you were elected about Aleppo?
I think everybody should own one, and the government should make sure of that.
Oh no, the Aleppo question.
I'm asking every candidate the same question. It's okay.
I think people have a right to own Lepos.
Okay, I think this has been a great show. I think we've learned a lot from Jacob, and we hope our listeners and possibly viewers, if we release some video from this as well, since we're using Zoom, we'll learn a lot as well. We're going to try to have a series of podcasts with different candidates up until the convention, whatever that may be.
It's going to be before the middle of July.
I just saw that they approved that they're going to try to do it before the middle of July.
Where?
We'll know in 10 days where and when.
Yeah, we'll know in 10 days. We'll know
An undisclosed bunker deep within the ground.
So Jacob, I'm hoping to actually meet you in person at an in-person convention, because I really do prefer in-person conventions. I really hope they don't try to pull off some kind of virtual convention. It just won't.
As of now, they say it's going to be in person.
I hope so. The
plan is in person before July 15th, and within 10 days, we'll have all the details.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to meet Jacob to in a place where we're not recorded. I have questions for him other than these ones.
It would be an honor and a pleasure, guys. And
it was a pleasure today. Thank you very much, Jacob. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Great show.
All right.
Guys.
Bye, guys.